to use your PhD skills as you prepare for this entrepreneurial journey in Germany. And of course, I will share aspects of my own startup experience as well. And I have to tell you, there's a lot of humor in it. Okay. So when to decide to start, to decide on a startup. So the first thing you need to keep in mind as that idea, that thought, that drive, that notion of going into the startup comes up is that you need to share the idea with somebody. So the first thing is that when your idea convinces at least 1 out of 3 critical critics, it's important that you know you have one confirmation that it is time to get into the startup experience. And also when you have a clear, unique selling proposition, once your USP is quite clear to you, if it's convincing for you, if you fully articulated what it is exactly you want to bring into the market space as a startup, what is motivating your decision to go into the startup, that has to be really, really clear for you. And you also need to really look at businesses that already have success stories behind them. If the idea you have has repeatedly failed in the market space, if the idea you have has never been tried before, it's also important to pause and reflect on it. But getting into the startup world, the lowest hanging fruit is that you are, that you're finding your first footing in an environment where there is recorded success in the business environment. And of course, you need to have an understanding of the term success is equal to cash flow. This is important. As Milton Friedman would say, that the cardinal reason why businesses are formed, or the cardinal reason for businesses, is to make profits. So irrespective of whether you have corporate social responsibilities to pursue, or all kinds of other social responsibilities to pursue, at the very core of that is cash flow. At the very core of that is profit making. So it has to be very clear for you that the idea which you've been developing in your mind to get into the startup environment can generate cash for you. I also have to say that sometimes cash is not the key motivation to get into a startup environment or a business environment. Cash becomes a product of that motivation. There are cases where things like that happen, and I will also try to highlight that in the course of my presentation today. So you basically need to understand that marketing must appear as a regular item on your cost list. So marketing is critical as somebody getting into the startup environment. So you fully need to articulate your marketing strategy. I'm sure you see all kinds of posts on social media, people trying to, sell their skills, sell products, sell services. All of this makes sense. It makes sense because out of 1,000, locations or 1,000 platforms where those marketing resources are placed on, at least one person would buy into it, or more than that will buy into it. So marketing is critical, really, really critical. Never underestimate the power of marketing. And you make that decision when you are sure no other commitments can stop you. Very important. So you would have, discussed this with your partners. You would have discussed this with people who count the most in your life. I want to get into the startup environment. It comes with all kinds of risks. And are you willing to support me, or do we have to get a divorce before I go into this? These are things you need to, be very clear about as you get into this startup journey. And you need to begin to view businesses as a risk and rewards lifestyle. It's important. There will be failures as you get into your startup journey, or even before you start. The failure might even, already initiate itself. But you need to take this in your stride. You need to fully understand that it is part of the process. The fact that there are risks and failures, but that the gains comes in picking yourself up and either continuing from where you were or reformulating your strategy and then going forward. So risk and rewards is a lifestyle of a startup. You need to keep this in mind. Then you need to make that decision for a startup when you are mature enough to accept being broke and getting rich in a slow and methodical manner. This is very important, extremely important. The fear of of being broke should not overcome you. It should not, take the upper hand in all you do. It might happen, it might not happen, but when it happens, you need to be brave enough and mature enough to know that, oh, this is very likely, but that shouldn't stop my dream or my energy from, picking me up and going beyond where I really want to be. So these are things that you need to bring into full consideration as you decide on a startup. Now, how to prepare for a startup? Of course, you come from an environment where the demand for research, the demand for interrogating a system, the demand for understanding what's really happening is critical. So as a PhD student, whether your PhD is in the scientific world or your PhD is in the field of humanities, research is important. The investigation to get the truth, to get the facts, this is important. So armed with that skill, you need to be able to also research on the business idea that you intend to pursue. And this research could come in all kinds of forms. It could come in the form of attending webinars, attending conferences, workshops that would help you sharpen your idea about these options or the different options of a business that you want to get into as a startup. Even it might require attending workshops and webinars to determine if getting into the world of a startup is for you in the first place. I don't think everybody is meant to become an entrepreneur. It takes certain qualities, which I will also itemize in this presentation, certain qualities that arms you for the entrepreneurial journey, okay? To be able to find a partner, a vision mate, who probably comes with skills that complement yours. This is really, really important. One of the things that drives human beings is your individuality. Sometimes you also bring that individuality in decisions to get into business. And I can tell you this from a firsthand experience, that it's important that you start with a partner. And keep in mind that no human being is perfect. So there are certain things that you should say, this is a must in a partner. And once you find that person, build a relationship with that person, share your vision with the person should be able to have a full appreciation of that vision, and both of you try to grow that vision together as a team. You need to make sure that you can handle the operations within your business. This is very important. It's important that, for instance, if you decide to open a restaurant, it's important that you know how to cook. I can say this over and over again. If you decide to open a restaurant, please make sure that you ask a skilled cook. It's important, because when you hire people to play the role or take up certain critical roles in your business, and those people disappoint you, you're left alone, standing. You should be able to pick up from wherever that vacuum has been created. You should be able to fill that vacuum and run with the idea. Extremely important. And of course, you need to be able to develop a business plan. Plan must not be perfect before you start executing it, but there are certain critical elements within your business plan that must be in place before you start executing it. So all of these you can identify, not just with your mates, but also probably sit down with a business consultant to figure out, where do I start? How do I begin to execute this idea? And of course, fundraising. You must not raise all the funds that you require to be able to start off your business, but there has to be a critical amount, and you have to identify that critical amount. Once that critical amount is realized, then it's time for you to start executing what you have on your business plan. You need to be able to look for affordable talent. There are certain talents that are a must in your business, but they are too expensive for you. So sometimes you need to be able to settle for a second-rate programmer and then quietly build up the business with this programmer. The programmer improves their skill as they interact with you, as you try to release instructions on what should be done. They improve themselves, their skills, programming skills, and things go forward. Whatever it is, you need to be able to look for affordable talents as you go forward. And of course, very important, you need to be able to discuss your plans with a mentor or an advisor. This is important, really, really important. There has to be somebody that looks at your idea as an outsider and offers honest criticism, honest advice on how you can go forward as a startup or in your startup with your startup idea. Now, some of the businesses in Germany, there are different types of businesses or business forms here in Germany. And it's important that you pick that which suits best the idea that you intend to push for your startup. And sometimes the decision you make on some of them are driven by the cost of entry, into that form of business. But whatever it is, you need to think about it. If it requires seeking professional advice before you pick which business form that you like to adopt, then seek that advice. The first one is a general partnership, this so-called offene Handelsgesellschaft. In this case, you need at least 2 people to be able to set this up. The requirements are not very stiff, I would say, but whatever it is, it has to be registered. It has to be a registered business. And in all cases, you need to have certain structures. Those structures I'm going to itemize in the next slide. The next form of business is the limited partnership business, the so-called Kommanditgesellschaft. Again, we require at least 2 people to be able to form this business. Among those 2 people, your liabilities are limited. And again, the business has to be registered in Germany. Then we have the limited liability company, the so-called GmbH or Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung. This is one of the most common businesses you will find here in Germany. It is, a limited liability company. You need at least 2 people to be able to start this business. And the minimum amount of a capital that a member could bring into the business is €1. The starting capital for this business is 25,000 euros. You could start off with half of it, and over time, you pay off the rest part of it. This business comes, of course, with a certain amount of liability. The liability is oftentimes scales with the amount of shares each member of the business brings into it. And then we have the entrepreneurial company at limited liability, the so-called OG or Unternehmensgesellschaft Haftungsbeschränkt. It's almost similar like the GmbH, and this business idea is quite new in Germany. I would say it only started in the mid 2000s, so 2008, 2009. It came into law here in Germany. The starting cost here is relatively low, so you can actually start off with €1. And the presupposition is that the OG would eventually grow into a GmbH. And so for cases where the intention of the directors of the company is to grow this company into a GmbH, you need to set aside at least 1/4 of your surplus income at the end of every year to be able to grow the company into a GmbH. In other words, to be able to make up the 25,000 euros that are required for you to transform the company into a GmbH. And finally, we have the joint stock company or Aktiengesellschaft, as we call it here in Germany, where you have a group of people that buy into a company, they list the company in the public domain. The key feature here is that there's a supervisory body for the company. The supervisory body is made up of boards of directors. They provide all kinds of oversight, all kinds of advisory role for the company. And the starting capital here is at least 50,000 euros for you to start an AG. The AG is also quite common in Switzerland. It's probably, takes precedence almost the way GmbH takes precedence here in Germany. So these are decisions you would have to make before you venture into a startup in Germany and decide on which works best for you. Irrespective of which one works best for you, you need to have a business plan. Very important. And that plan has to be developed based on researched facts. That plan has to be developed based on all kinds of factors that gives you the motivation, the confidence to start executing that plan. And of course, you need to have a business address. In Germany, all businesses have an address, very important. And you need to have a tax consultant. You need to have a legal person, a legal advisor for the company. You need to have insurance that covers all kinds of things, covers materials, office equipment, covers people who are going to work for you. This is critical here in Germany, especially the tax aspect of it. And I can tell you, this is not something you can Google yourself out of. You need an expert in Germany for tax-based issues. No matter how small you were as a company or as a business entity, it's important. And that tax consultant, all the receipts you generate as a business, simply just hand it over to them and you focus on the vision of the business, okay? To build up a team, very important, because oftentimes when investors decide to invest in a startup, one of the things they look into is the team, the makeup of the team, the skill sets of those within the team, the roles of the different team members. This is very, very important. And is a decision you and your partner has to make, or you have to make as you constitute that team and empower that team to execute your vision. You need to have access to a business network. There are certain locations here in Germany where you set up a startup, certain German states, certain cities, they already have all kinds of infrastructure that have been built up to help startup companies succeed. You need to find, if the city where you are is not, in quote, a business-friendly city, my advice to you is to move to a business-friendly city and set up your startup. Very, very important. So that network, that business network would oftentimes give you access to other startup companies in the neighborhood, even to bigger companies. It gives you an opportunity to showcase what you're bringing into the business environment. Sometimes there are coaches that will coach you on how to prepare for investment, to prepare pitching processes, to prepare for growth. So these are resources which typically you would find within a business network that would help you grow as a startup. You need to enroll and sign yourself up to all kinds of associations, whether the Handwerkskammer or the Industrial Chamber of Commerce or Industrie Handelskammer. You need to, find yourself in that environment, get to know what people are doing, all kinds of workshops, conferences, programs, meetings that are taking place. You need to identify those that fit the operations of your business and be part of it. And of course, cash flow. In terms of cash flow, you need to set your business up in such a way, your startup business, even though it's small, but you can set it up in such a way that you are appealing to an international audience. This is very, very important. Try not to put all your eggs in one location or basket. Really spread your net as wide as possible so that income comes from both local market space and an international market space. You need to find one way to make this happen for your startup. And then how could you use your PhD skills to get into the startup world and build up your startup or start your entrepreneurial journey? So the question is, what are scholars extremely good at? What scholars are extremely good at is data. In today's world, data is critical for all businesses. The more data you have and the more skill sets you have to be able to interpret data, the closer you are to being a successful startup. I can guarantee you this. Data is extremely important. And for you as a scholar, you have a firm understanding of what to do with data. You already know how to refine data as a scholar. You know how to cleanse data. You know how to standardize data, to normalize data, to align data, to transform data, to engineer data, to enrich data. You need to use those skills. You know how to improve the completeness of data, the accuracy of data, the granularity of data, the latency of data. These skills you need to bring in as you energize your startup idea. You know how to determine the structure of data. You know how to impose governance on data. You know how to create and curate data. And of course, you know how to increase the academic value of data and its visibility. So these are skills you have as a PhD student or as a postdoc or somebody who is already armed with a PhD degree, and you need to use it. You need to use it when you come into the market space of a topic you're interested in as a startup and begin to gather data. There are all kinds of intelligent reports, economic reports. If you can have access to those, look at them with the same intensity you look at your academic data and see what you can glean out of it to arm yourself as you launch your startup. And of course, data for you as a startup translates into opportunities. This is all you should see in data. You need to be able to identify opportunities, what you can do with it, how you can use that data to move your startup forward. Very, very important. And of course, you need to find somehow, some way to correlate your talent to the data you're looking at. So the talent you bring into your startup environment, how can you use that talent to enhance data, or how can you use data to enhance that talent to drive forward your startup business? So I'll briefly talk about my own startup experience. The very first time I started thinking about the startup was 1 year into my PhD work in the year 2020. That was the first time I thought about, oh, I need to start thinking about a startup. And the motivation for this was the nature of what I was doing. You know, I'm not saying this because I'm Nigerian, but, you know, Nigerians see business opportunities in everything they do. And for me, when I started dealing with really very high quality data as a PhD student, I couldn't help but seeing business opportunities in it. So that was the first time I actually started thinking about startup. And then in 2013, about 4 years into my professorship, I started thinking about, oh, I think it's time for me to get out and set up a startup. And I never put that startup up until in April 2014. When I founded my first startup. I did this with a partner, a very good friend of mine. We had very complementary roles, and we both decided to quit all we were doing as career and moved into the startup space. So my first startup was in 2014. In 2016, I set up the Time-Based Institute for Materials Application and 3D Printing Solutions. In 2017, I brought an investor into our 2014 startup. We remodeled the company, rebranded it, put up a new name. It came up with a new startup name. So we had a second startup in 2017. In 2019, I sold my shares in the first startup, got out of that first startup, put up a second startup in 2019, a third startup in 2019. And in 2020, we had the fifth startup. And in 2021, we had a sixth startup. In 2022, we have a seventh startup. So you see the prolific nature of it and how serial this is. And what I can tell you is that for each of these topics where I've gotten involved in putting up a startup, I had to scale my skills to them. So there is a certain skill I have, which I am able to contribute in all these startups. And one thing I want you to know is that sometimes the driving force must not be the cash profit that comes out of it. It could just be the challenge that is being presented to you that makes you get involved in a startup. It could just be the personal development that comes out of it. And if there is economic gratification coming out of it, it is just a bonus in certain cases. But whatever it is, you must have something that keeps you running on a monthly basis. This is important. Something that ensures that your existential stability is not seriously shaken. It must be running somewhere in the background, and that could allow you to go into all these startup experiences. Before I close, I want to highlight a few things. One of them is that I want to highlight what is and what must not be important for you as a startup. The first thing in terms of what is the most important in the world or in the life of a startup business is that the founders, the visionary, the originators of the startup idea must be committed. Very important. You need to be able to persevere. You should come with a load of determination. You should be able to identify opportunities. You should be a tolerant person. Very important. You should have a network of friends and families that push you through. You should have a business partner, a trustworthy person who you do business with. You should have a mentor, and you should be an optimistic person, because I tell you, there will be challenges, you will fall. You should be able to have a sufficient amount of optimism to stand up and move on. And you should be skilled. It doesn't matter what that skill could be, but it should be a skill that is transferable within your startup environment. And you should have a passion for whatever you're doing. Because think about it, if you're not convinced by the story you're trying to tell in the market space, why should other people be convinced by it? And the only way you can actually convince people in the market space is by working with passion. You should be passionate about what you're doing. Now, there are a few things that is not the must, that must not be important in a startup, must not be. And these are some of those things. You must not be successful as a startup with creativity, with innovation, with imagination, with independency, with winning, with a big team, with access to excessive funds, with big profit margins, with political connections, with professional connections, or with a board of directors. You don't need all of this to be a successful startup. You don't. Thank you.
Very much, Professor. Can you hear us? Professor, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can barely hear you. Yeah, if somebody could come closer to
move closer to the
Perfect.
computer.
Thank you very much.
I do have one. So if anybody else has any other question, indicate and then you have to move closer to it so that you can hear us. All right. Maybe I ask my question first. Do you have a question? Good. Okay. I'll ask my question first, and then we'll take other questions in the house. My question is a very simple one. And basically, I would like to ask your opinion on the situation where the startup you're thinking or you're working on is focused directly on solving a problem in your home country or on the continent. So say I'm from Nigeria, I'm working on a startup idea that is directly focused on solving a problem in Nigeria. What is the strategic advantage of incorporating that company in Germany as opposed to doing that in Nigeria, basically, from your experience?
Perfect.
So that's my question.
Thank you very much for that question. Some of the things you need to look at is if you have a startup, either in the business, in the service sector or in the production sector, you need to have an idea of what the operational workflow of that startup looks like. You need to know where exactly you're bringing in materials, where the input sources are for the materials, the resources you need to be able to make success out of this business. If most of them are coming from Europe, I would say register your company here in Europe or in Germany, and then execute the job in Nigeria. This is important. And if there is any critical input that you must get from Europe, I would say it's important the business entity is registered in Europe. Now, because of your heritage as a Nigerian, it's much easier for you to get into Nigeria, do what you need to do, and come out. And but the other way around is a lot difficult. So if you're already fully operating on the ground in Nigeria and you encounter bottlenecks that can only be unclogged by using resources in Europe, it's not easy for you to come to Europe to get that resource or those resources. So you need to fully understand your full business workflow, and based on that, you decide on where you will domicile your startup company. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. All right, so we'll take the second question. All right, I think you can sit here so that Prof can hear you.
Thank you from Brando for that very insightful talk. So you said in your talk that you and your partner have to leave your jobs in order to be committed to your startup, right? So my question is, at what point did you know that that is the point that you could leave your job? So was it that your business already made money and your sustenance was guaranteed, or was there already an investment, or how did you know that this was the time to leave your job?
Okay, you need to know what's most important for you. So if you have a family and you find yourself at crossroads of making this kind of decision, I would say it's important that early enough you're already putting money aside to make sure that the family doesn't suffer when you start this startup journey. This is important. The other aspect would be if your life partner, either your husband or your wife, is employed, so at least you know that there is a sort of income that ensures that there is food on the table, the kids are clothed, and very basic bills are paid. And so these elements have to be in place. For me, that was the case. It had to be in place before I made that decision that, okay, it's time to pack up and leave the university full time and go into the startup environment. Of course, it was also quite clear to me that I would not start making money from day one based on the nature of startup that we were running at first. So there was just no way money could be made from day one. It just wasn't possible. Our projections were that if things had gone according to the business plan, at least within the first 6 months, we should already be able to have a clientele base that would allow us generate income to run the company. Thank you. Okay. Well, the point really, the point is that yeah, you need to be quite clear on what you want to do, in the world of a startup, and you need to be armed with data, and there are certain things that must be in place so that midway you don't give up. Okay, in my case, as I said, we had to save up money to make sure that at least our families, my family and the family of my partner could live for 1 year. And from our business plan, there was just no way the company could make money earlier than 6 months based on the nature of business we're starting out. And so cash flow actually started effectively 6 months after we had launched the startup. There were all kinds of challenges, of course, and these are things that you deal with as you go on as a startup. Okay.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions you have? So we've got 1, 2, 3. I think we could talk to that first. So please come
Good afternoon. Please, if you can come a bit closer, then I can hear you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, this is my question. Like when you started, like I want to ask that, what can you mention perhaps 1 or 2 challenges you faced then and how you were able to overcome these challenges? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, well, one of the big challenges we faced was finding customers, finding investors as well, but people to buy into the idea and start paying for your services. and investors who would be convinced by the business idea you have and decide to invest in it. So for me, this was the biggest challenge that we encountered. Another challenge that we encountered was actually the first team we started off with. Yeah, and you know, I say this again with humor. My colleague and I, we approached the startup experience in a very casual way. Casual in the sense that we started hiring people that will work with us. Some of them came as interns. Some of them were on a payroll, which we had set up. And in terms of interaction, you know, here in Germany, we have two pronouns. You have the du and you have the sie, as we say in Germany. And we started off by, you know, dutzing, as we say in Germany. So a very informal way of addressing oneself. And I was already about 40 years old when we started this startup, and my partner was 2 years younger than I am. So we're about in the same age group. And most of the people we hired were much younger than we were. And for some reason, the boundaries of respect, you know, was being overshot. And one day we just sat down and said, we're going to fire everybody. And we fired everybody. Yeah. And except ourselves, of course. So we fired everybody and recruited new people. And it was very quite clear that the word do will never be used again. So these are things that you would encounter as well when you come up with a startup, and you need to make a very firm decision on that.
Okay.
So hello, good morning, and thank you for your talk for today. I have one question. So my first question is about the PhD startup. So what is your advice for someone who is going to do a startup here in Germany or back home? So what is your experience or what is your thought about it? And one question is I will let this question first.
Okay, so basically, let me just answer the first part. Okay, so basically, you want to know if it's better to start up in Germany or start up back home, correct? Yeah. Again, it depends on the nature of business that you intend to start up. So when I think about the amount of money we put into trying to start up our company, if we use that money in Africa to start up a business, it would have gone differently. Simply because you get more value, so to say, for little money, I would say, in Africa. And also, but we have skilled people in Africa who probably would have done very well if the business idea we had was different. But the business idea we started off with was very technical, very, very technical. It required developing software for machines. It required developing materials. It required developing machines. And that level of expertise, we could only find it here. And of course, you probably could have trained people to be able to, hit that level of expertise, but it would have taken a much longer time for the business to attain steady state. And we really, really wanted to get to steady state as quickly as possible as a business.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Prof. So I have 3 questions for you. I'll make it very quick. So the first one goes, you talked about fundraising. So I would like to ask, how did you go about fundraising for your startup? What are the ways one go about fundraising? Secondly, for a startup, like for PhDs, PhD students, must we get to the point that we become like citizens first before we can think of a startup, or maybe we get a permanent residence? And the last question is, for limited liability company, are there benefits from the government or like support coming from the government if one is to venture into this? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I go with the first one, which is fundraising. So we actually we got an investor on the after the 73rd pitching. So we got an investor after the 73rd pitching, and it wasn't a German-based investor. This investor actually came from Switzerland, and this investor found us on the internet and was interested in the machine we had developed because they needed it for a much bigger operation they were developing both in Switzerland and in India. And so he actually came to buy a machine, but somehow became an investor afterwards. So it was an interesting coincidence, I would say, and it was quite timely because we were already, at the very verge of saying, oh, we're going to give up, we're going to, downsize the team and, come up with all kinds of structural changes to be able to keep going. So yeah, it takes time, and I don't want to sound a bit I don't want to make it sound simple, but it's almost like playing the lottery. The more tickets you buy, the higher your chances of winning. And so you need to be visible, you need to go around, as I already mentioned, there are all kinds of business networks existing in all kinds of cities out here in Germany, and also outside Germany in the entire DACH region. You need to take advantage of those meetings. You need to also make the investment that goes with attracting investors. So it costs money to get money. It's a fact you need to work with as you go forward. Okay, good. And then the second question has to do with citizenship. I'm a Nigerian, and I will remain a Nigerian, really. So the passport I have, the only passport I have in my life is a Nigerian passport. And of course, I have a permanent residency here. I don't know what role that played in trying to allow me to set up a business, but in any case, to found a business here in Germany and operate that business, you need to be a resident. So it doesn't matter what category of residency you have, you need to be a resident. And then the third question you had has to do with government support. There are all kinds of instruments that exist, at the federal government level that would allow you to attract funding. Some of them requires that you put in an application, you go through a very rigorous due diligence process. One of the biggest startup funding group here in Germany is the so-called High-Tech Grund Fund. They're based in Bonn, and they have a very rigorous process, but when they invest real big. And there are all kinds of other tools that exist, within the government environment to, age training to help you attract certain skills. Also, you can also take advantage of, putting up advertisements or openings for interns with a certain background. It's cheap labor, I would say, but it helps you get certain things done as quickly as possible. And so you need to, without thinking too much about running the race, the most important thing is to start running. That's all. As you run, you would encounter obstacles. You need to figure out how to navigate through those obstacles, whether you jump or whether you circumvent. These are decisions you have to make sometimes on a minute-by-minute basis. And whatever it is, never feel discouraged. Never feel discouraged, whatever it is. Okay.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time for being patient in order to answer all our questions. And of course, we know you are our advisor and a friend of the house. So we'll always have you around to ask more questions in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you.